Okay, everybody, welcome and thank you so much for joining us this week for our webinar series for Minnesota small businesses, geared toward helping you all figure out how to navigate all the resources that have recently become available to you, legal changes as it relates to the CARE Act, and essentially a step-by-step process for how to apply for the relief aid that's recently become available. So the theme of today's presentation will be a step-by-step process on applying for SBA-eligible programs and an overview of a PPP as well. To give you a little bit of context on why we're doing this. So a generator is a startup accelerator, and you don't necessarily need to know what that means. But essentially, we act as a connector in the business community for high-growth startups. We figured throughout this crisis, we might as well leverage our position to help as many people as possible as the economic situation becomes more dire as it relates to this crisis. So we decided to offer up some free programming, relying on a lot of great speakers who are we're extremely grateful to lend their time to us this week to offer all of you some guidance on how to navigate all these acronyms. Questions during today's webinar. We have a QA box live. Type in questions and feel free to send to host. We will be doing our best to address these questions as they come through throughout the presentation, so stay tuned there. Also, feel free to send emails to ben@generator.com. That's me. My name is Ben Stanley as context, and I work for Generator during the webinar with any other questions that you might have. Due to the number of people on today's webinar, as those continue to roll in, unfortunately, we won't be able to resolve technical issues as they occur kind of on an ongoing basis. We'll try our best to do it, but just to give you a heads up that there might be issues with audio, things like we might not necessarily be able to control immediately. So just bear with us as we navigate through this. We will record the webinar and share it on our emergency response program website under our resources page, and you can see the URL here. So getting to today's speakers before I hand it off, I'd like to introduce Bruce Strong and Jason Mueller. Bruce Strong is a state director for Minnesota Small Business Development Center Network. The SBDC helps entrepreneurs start and grow businesses that succeed by providing one-on-one consultation, assistance in accessing capital and training programs for aspiring and existing business owners. Strong has extensive experience in public, community, and economic development, and in the private sector in mortgage lending and mortgage lending and banking industries. Jason Mueller is a senior consultant for SBDC Milwaukee. Jason's areas of expertise include operations, retail, financial projections, and search engine optimization. Clients who work with him state that they enjoy that he hits many angles and gives lots to think about, but creates a list of only 3 things to work on to stay focused on. Jason likes to combine information and data with an owner's gut feeling to create a direction to move forward. So that being said, I'd like to hand it off to Bruce. And Bruce, feel free to go ahead and share your screen and unmute yourself to kick things off.
Okay. So hopefully you can see my screen. Doesn't look like it.
Not quite yet. Have you hit the share button on the bottom?
I have, yep. It says it will stop other sharing, and I said okay to that. I hit mine. There we go.
There we go. Okay.
Oops. Okay, as Ben said, I'm the state director of the Minnesota SBDC. We are a partnership of the Small Business Administration and here in Minnesota, the state government, the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. DEED is the primary host for our program here in Minnesota, and I actually work in the DEED office, but our SBDC covers the entire state. We'll talk about that in just a minute. My job this morning is to talk a little bit about the SBDCs in general and what's happening in Minnesota, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jason, who will talk more about the federal programs in play and the programs in Wisconsin. So the SBDC started back in the 1970s. A couple of smart college professors out on the West Coast got together and said, hey, this SBA that was created back in 1950 that was meant to help small businesses, so far all they're really doing is helping in terms of capital. It would be a really good idea if they did something to help businesses beyond capital, and specifically with the technical assistance they need in order to start and run a small business. And wouldn't it be great if we could link in the academic community, since we are college professors? We see all of these great things coming online. We've got a lot of young, bright minds available. We should really link these two things together. And so they pitched the idea to the SBA back in the 70s, and the SBA started a pilot program in about the mid 70s. It wasn't called the SBDC at that point, but ultimately that's what it became. All the various states came online slowly over a period of time, starting in the mid 1970s, so that by 1980 they passed a federal law which created the Small Business Act, and under that, specifically the SBDC centers. And again, the program is intended to strengthen existing and prospective small businesses by linking them with a variety of resources, including financial, including the SBA, and including the academic communities that are out there. Most SBDC centers, unlike ours, are in fact hosted by centers of higher education. And again, I just put a note in there that the Minnesota Center was created in 1979. Whoops. There's a list. We are now nationwide and in fact cover all US territories. There are 62 SBDCs nationwide, 1 in every state, 5 in California, 4 in Texas. And I'm missing somewhere. There must be another US territory out there that I'm missing, because I was adding these up this morning and that's only 61. But ultimately there are 62 centers around the country and in all US territories. Here in Minnesota, we have 9 regional centers. Again, we are a statewide program here in Minnesota. Each individual state program runs differently. They're all set up a little bit differently. They're funded a little bit differently, and the way that they work is a little different. And Jason will cover his what's happening in Wisconsin a little bit later. But here in Minnesota, again, we have 9 regional centers. Each of those centers have 4 or 5 satellite offices or outreach centers. And so we have a total of about 30 touch points throughout the state. We have more than 100 staff who work in those centers and satellite centers, all helping the small business community. Minnesota has about 500,000 small businesses. The vast majority of them, 99.5% of those, are all small businesses as defined by the SBA. Typically, that's fewer than 500 employees, but there are some other caveats that go along with various industry types that define what a small business is. If you have any questions, you can contact your SBDC or the SBA directly to find out the size standards for what defines a small business. So there are only about 2,500 large businesses in Minnesota, which is kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. We have 19 Fortune 50 world headquarters here in Minnesota, including 3M, Medtronic, General Mills, you name it. Again, they're the size of those companies. It's kind of mind-blowing to me that there are only about 2,500 of them that are considered large. Most of our small businesses have fewer than 20 employees, and in fact, most have fewer than 5 employees. However, they comprise about 50% of the total employment in Minnesota, and about 66% of all new jobs are created in small businesses throughout Minnesota. And again, those statistics are pretty universal throughout the country. Minnesota is not especially unique in those areas. That's the true nature of small business throughout the country. So when they say that small business is in fact the economic backbone of the economy, it is exactly right. And you can imagine that that backbone is being severely tested now through the COVID response, the forced shutdowns of many small businesses throughout the country, the stay-at-home provisions. Those are all going to take, unfortunately, an extremely severe toll on the small business community by the time we get through with all of this. It's already impacting small businesses, as you well know. And my fear is that we are going to lose a major segment of current small businesses that are out there. But again, we're here to help rebuild them once this is all over with and the restrictions are lifted. Most small businesses do most of the exporting. Again, well, actually not most of the exporting, but most of the small businesses in Minnesota do in fact export. But that's where, again, the large businesses, the 3Ms and the Medtronics, they kind of take over and they do the bulk of the exports. Our mission, again, this is literally our mission statement here in Minnesota, is to help entrepreneurs start and grow small businesses that succeed. It doesn't help to start a small business if it's not going to succeed. And again, we try and encompass the full perspective of what that means, both in terms of capital infusion, but also the technical advice and technical know-how that it takes to own and operate a small business these days. Our vision is, and it's been pretty well recognized, that we are the best technical assistance program in Minnesota, and certainly we contribute to the small business economy. The whole overall mission of the SBDC, of course, is not just to go out and do great things for small businesses, but it ties back to the impacts, the economic impacts that those small businesses create for the state and national economy. Again, it's all about job creation, increased tax revenue, and all of those things that help build and fuel our economy, both here in the state and across the country. And these are the values that we incorporate here in Minnesota. We do three things, essentially. We do one-on-one consulting at no cost to anyone who is interested in starting or growing a small business in Minnesota. That no cost, however, is important to realize that there's a distinction between that and free. Our services are not free. Our consultants don't work for free. They're not volunteers. They are, in fact, paid professional business consultants. And the way that they get paid is that funding mechanism that's created through SBA and the state funding and our local partners who contribute. We have to match all of the funds that we get from SBA on a one-for-one basis using funds of our own that don't come from other federal sources. And that total budget is what we use to pay our consulting staff. So again, it's no cost to the client, but our consultants are in fact paid professional consultants. Here in Minnesota, and again, this does vary a little bit from one state to another, we tend to be experts here in Minnesota at access to capital. We're kind of among the top tier of agencies throughout the country, SBDCs throughout the country, in terms of our loan packaging and funding. We don't lend funding directly, but we know who does lend the money, and we help our clients prepare and apply for and secure the funding that is available through banks, both including the ones that are guaranteed by SBA loans and SBA backing, but other private conventional uninsured loans as well as other grant programs that are available out there. We do, again, as you see here, kind of the percentages. We do a lot of business planning and startup. We do a lot of financial analysis and cash flow management. We're very good at helping entrepreneurs understand the financial health of their own company so that they can make the decisions they need to grow and increase their sales and profitability. The next thing that we do is training. And again, on everything that you can imagine with regard to owning or operating a small business. Financial stuff, bookkeeping, QuickBooks, all of that kind of stuff. But we also do a lot of other training as well. We do Excel training. We do training on web design and social SEO, search engine optimization, all the other things, marketing, all the other things, again, that a business needs to know. And again, that even spills over to employment law and sales tax and all the other things that go along with that. And then finally, one of the things that we do is disaster assistance, whether it's physical disasters. Here in the upper Midwest, we're about to enter tornado season. And again, tornado and flooding is a big deal here in the upper Midwest. And so we do a lot of relief around, we're always a first responder when it comes to helping small businesses get through those disasters. And certainly now with the COVID issue, we are again a first responder in terms of helping businesses understand the programs that Jason's going to run through in just a moment, and helping those small businesses hopefully stay intact and ready to recover when this is all over with. As I mentioned, the SBDC here in Minnesota is the primary host for our program, is the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. We are one of only 7 SBDC centers throughout the country that are still hosted by a state agency. All of the others are hosted by higher education institutions. And quite frankly, it doesn't really make a whole lot of difference who the primary host is. But that's just the way that we're set up here in Minnesota. Again, right now, obviously, we're under a stay-at-home executive order, as is 90% of the country. We have processed more than 320,000 applications for unemployment. DEED works with my program, but they also are the administrator of the unemployment insurance program and the workforce programs that are available in Minnesota. Specifically to help with the COVID response for small businesses, DEED has created 2 programs in addition to the federal programs that are out there. This first one is the Small Business Emergency Loan Program. As you can see there, loans are available from $2,500 to $35,000 for any business that was forced to close as a result of the 2 executive orders our governor passed when they shut down, beginning with the bars and restaurants, but other non-critical businesses throughout Minnesota. This program is interest-free. It's a 5-year term and is partially forgivable, up to 50% forgivable. However, it's meant to be a bridge loan. It's an emergency loan. And so we encourage businesses to apply for the loan programs available through the SBA, specifically the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, or the IDL loan as it's referred to, as well as the new Paycheck Protection Program I'm hoping that Jason's going to cover. And again, these programs are available, or these loans are available only through specific lenders here in Minnesota. The second program that we have is a loan guarantee program that we just put up. And again, this is available only to businesses, the smaller of small businesses, businesses with fewer than 250 employees who were impacted by the COVID disaster. It provides an 80% guarantee to private lenders. So again, these are typically going to be SBA insured loans. These are going to be loans that private lenders make, but they're looking for a guarantee similar to the one that they get from SBA. This 80% guarantee is actually a little more generous guarantee than SBA typically provides. And again, these are meant to be small loans up to $200,000 guarantee. So a total loan amount of $250,000. Rates and terms will be established by the lenders. And again, lenders are being just recruited for this program, the relatively new program that's been up and running in Minnesota for about 6 days now. And again, there's a different set of lenders, and folks can find information about that on the DEED website. That is all I have to cover. I'm going to turn it over to Jason. Here's my contact information. If any of you here in Minnesota have questions, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Bruce, thank you. Appreciate the overview on the SBDC program. There's a lot of similarities, a few differences. I'm going to start sharing my screen now. And I've got a few things to go over, that some of them, just a little bit of Wisconsin specifics. Yeah, my name is Jason Miller. I'm a SBDC consultant out of the Milwaukee office here in Wisconsin. I just wanted to share a little bit about what the the Wisconsin program looks like. I'm going to try to move that so you can see the map. 13 centers across the state of Wisconsin, located at various UW institutions. The main institution that we work out of is the UW system in Madison. So that's where most of the organization comes from and sets up different centers in our state. We do provide the no-cost business consulting, which is really nice. My specific center out in Milwaukee serves the Washington, Ozaukee, and Milwaukee counties. There's a few consultants that work in our state that are paired with economic development that work in certain counties to provide specific assistance there as well. But yes, we are celebrating 40 years, so it's good to be part of the program. SBDC Network is a resource provider. We are here to help the business owners get through this. There is a lot of information that is changing almost daily. So we're here to help stay ahead of this and then try to distill some of this information for you. There are lots of options for funding available. A couple of the federal programs, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan is one of them. I'm going to be going through what that application looks like. Got a couple of suggestions on how to fill that out as well. There's also the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP. I'm going to go through a little bit of that. There's some interesting challenges with that one I'm going to try to help you through as well. But there's also some local programs. There's some of the chambers of commerce that are offering some microloans. Kiva in our state that does the microloan program. They extended their program from $10,000 to $15,000 for small businesses. And then our state office put together a pretty good page on wisconsinsbdc.org. If you look at the digital loan page on wisconsinsbdc.org, there are some FAQs that they update pretty much daily to try to stay ahead of some of the programs and some of the changing information. So to go through some of this, if you want to apply for the economic injury disaster loan, you can go straight to the SBA's website on this portal, and it does take you directly to that program. So the disaster loan was the first program that was announced. It's administered directly by the SBA. So you apply on their portal. One of the loan officers or program administrators out of the processing center will contact the applicant directly to go through their application. So what this does, this is a fund that is put together to provide some capital to small businesses to get through these next couple of months. So again, applications right on the SBA's website. How do you qualify? You do have to be a business that is defined by the SBA's definition of a small business. Most of those are, if you're under 500 employees, there is a tool to figure out if your actual industry fits small business, but the general rule of thumb is under 500 employees. You can use these disaster loan funds to cover accounts payable. So everything from payroll to rent, utilities, other loans that you have, they could be used to cover a lot of things, which is really nice. The interest rates for small business are at 3.75% for small business, or they're also extending this to nonprofits at a rate of 2.75%. So even nonprofits can jump into this and get some assistance as well. What banks are authorized to do this? This is actually directly through the SBA. The PPP is the one that's the program that's going directly through the banks and lending. I did see in the Q&A there was a question about one of the banks is not accepting loans right now. I'll go over that in just a little bit because there are some other options. And the limit that the business can receive, I believe these are up to 10 million. So that should help out the small businesses with the larger employee counts. So the process turnaround time, it's been a very overwhelming response at the SBA. When you apply, there is probably a 3-week is what I've been told processing time for some of these applications. There is a additional thing that was rolled out after the EIDL was launched for a $10,000 advance. I'll go through that in a little bit. This is the disaster loan is determined by a few things. One, you have to be in business before a certain date. 2, you have to be having revenues in your business. You can't be like a brand new startup with no revenues. You do have to demonstrate what your 12-month sales history look like, as well as what your 12-month average expenses look like. Now, on the application, it asks you for what your expenses are. I highly suggest you go through your accounting materials and pull out what your rents have been, what your payroll has been, any other accounts payable, so you can have that breakdown. Because when you get asked about what this application means for your business, the more of your numbers that you have available, the easier it's going to be to process this. So a lot of this is also going to be determined, for payroll. So at the heart of these programs, it's meant to keep the business afloat, make sure the business doesn't close. So again, emphasize what you are averaging per month on payroll. Some of the other things that I've been hearing along this, I might go a little bit off slide. Processing time has been a little bit longer. Just be patient as things change. Another thing that's kind of nice in the state of Wisconsin, WEDC, our economic development statewide organization, has also set up a 2020 program for small businesses. If you have an existing loan with CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution, there is this grant program available, up to $20,000 for businesses that have no more than 20 employees. So this was really designed to help some of the Main Street businesses get an additional source of economic relief in this. WEDC does have a direct page for this. It's on wedc.org under their 2020 program, right on their website. I did address or mention the Kiva loan piece that was extended up to $15,000, which is kind of nice. In Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Women's Business Initiative Corporation, or known as WIBIC in our state, does manage some of the Kiva process here. Kiva.org has all the information on there if the $15,000 could help your business. So again, my office is out of Milwaukee. We partner with the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. We are here to help. Again, the state office has put together the disaster loan resources. It's updated almost daily as some of these programs change. If you just go to wisconsinsbdc.org, there's a thing right at the top to click to get to the most current information on that. So with that, I want to show you really quick what the application portal looks like for the disaster loan. We got some screenshots of this, which should be able to walk you through. When this first rolled out, the portal was really clogged. The website, I think, went down a couple of times. So they had rebuilt it. This new streamlined process is a little bit easier to navigate. It's really designed to try to get small businesses and some of the nonprofits in there. What you have to do first is when you go to the application portal, you have to figure out what your company profile looks like. Most of them is going to be the business with not more than 500 employees. Or if you're an individual or an independent contractor, that works. There are some nonprofit sections as well. You also have to check that you are not engaged in any illegal activity and some of these other disclosure pieces. You're not delinquent on child support. One thing to note, this program was not designed for ag and farm businesses. However, I do believe there is a USDA program that supports farmers. So you can look at the USDA website to figure out what assistance is applicable to those businesses. This one is also not for lobbying organizations, and you can't be a member of Congress or part of a state or local government. Once you get into this, this is the main profile of the business, all the information for your business, the name, the trade name if you have one, the tax ID number for your organization. The dropdown asks you if you're an LLC, corporation, what type of organization you are under that. And then if you're a nonprofit organization, yea or nay. Now here's a couple of tips I'll give you. So the gross revenues for the business prior to January 31st, what you want to do is total up your sales, and then it's listed cost of goods for the 12 months. This is where I put your total expenses for the business. For the nonprofits out there, here's where you can actually put in your operating costs. I've had a couple of calls with some nonprofits in my area. This seems to fit them fairly well. And then down below, you do have to put the actual address for the business. Now, if one business has multiple locations, you just put the main address of the main location or the corporate office if that's applicable. have your articles of incorporation ready so you can communicate when the business was actually established. And then the number of employees, that's going to be another big one. The third page of the application is more the business owner, the background of the business owner. There's a thing to check if the business is owned by another business entity. So there's a couple of extra questions that you might get asked on that one. So the owner of the business, all of their contact info goes down here. The personal address of the individual applying. If there are multiple owners, you can add an additional owner there. Now, the last page of this application, I want to show you, there's a couple of disclosures, making sure of your background, if there is any background. Hopefully you're not under indictment right now. And then for some organizations, they might have their accountant or another organization fill out this application for them. This is just to disclose that. If there's a fee, please disclose that you paid them. Now here's the additional piece that was added onto the program, the advance of up to $10,000. Make sure you check this box for this application. What this is designed to do is get some money to a business quicker to start the funding process. So this would be an advance of the total EIDL loan that you would be applying for. If you apply to the program very early and this checkbox wasn't there on the original application form, you do have to go back and apply again and make sure this checkbox is checked there if you are looking for that. It will ask you for the bank name, the account and routing number so they can make that advance quicker. So that is the fourth page of this disaster loan application. It's much more streamlined. I've been on the website several times. It has not crashed, so I feel like this portal is a little bit easier to manage. So that's kind of nice. Now, I will speak a little bit, I don't have a lot of time. I'm trying to keep things rolling along, but I want to speak a little bit about the Paycheck Protection Program because that was the next step that was passed under the CARES Act. So this is a forgivable loan. If you use the proceeds under the PPP for at least 75% of these funds going to payroll, including to pay yourself. Now, these applications have to go through a bank. The banks that can process SBA loans are the ones going to be handling this. So there was a question in the Q&A box earlier that Wells Fargo announced they weren't accepting applications. I was looking around and I found several credit unions have been also part of this program. So you can look to see if the credit unions in your area or the community banks in your area are also processing these. So that is another at least channel that you can look to see if this is available. The thing about this program is the money is first come, first serve. So when you get your applications in, the first come, first serve are going to be the ones that have the first chance at it. When you do the application, you can get 2.5 times the average monthly payroll costs. So again, this is designed to keep the payroll portion of the business going, make sure employees have something coming into them. Interest rate on this one is 1% and the term is 2 years, which is really nice. No payments necessary for the first 6 months, very helpful there. Even if you're self-employed, you're eligible. You don't need to payroll employees. I did get confirmation on that. Now, here's an interesting point about this, though. If you have 1099 workers, the 1099 workers don't count towards the payroll. So that is one piece about the PPP that is just slightly different. So with the PPP, again, it's designed for payroll. So if you can put 75% towards the payroll, it is forgivable. It's very nice. But try to get the applications in early. If your bank isn't currently accepting those, find another institution that is and see if they are also accepting them. So it's kind of a lot to take in. There's a lot of programs, a lot of changes. But we are definitely here to help. I know the SBDCs in Minnesota are also here to help. So I think I might stop my share and turn this back over. So maybe we can address some of the Q&A unless, Bruce, was there anything that you wanted to add?
Bruce, I think you're muted right now.
I was still muted. Yep, sorry. I thought you did a good job, Jason, so thank you.
Thanks.
Well, great. Well, let's use this as an opportunity to turn to the Q&A. I know a bunch of questions have been popping up here. The first is if Bruce and Jason, first of all, would you be able to speak a little bit to differentiation between programs for nonprofits and for-profit organizations, / is there a distinction for these programs?
Well, in EIDL, nonprofits can also apply for that. You know, personally, I'm not the nonprofit expert, so I don't know all of the funding pieces for nonprofits, but I definitely work with a couple on the EIDL piece. Bruce?
Most of the programs that we mentioned today are available. I don't know about the Wisconsin specific programs,
Yeah.
but even here in Minnesota, our programs are mostly available to nonprofits as well.
Good.
Another question is around which of these loans are forgivable, and essentially if you could walk through what that process looks like.
Well, under the PPP, when you use 75% of the money for payroll, that is forgivable. That's really nice. The $10,000 portion on the EIDL is forgivable, so that's also helpful. Let's see, trying to think. Bruce, any other additions on that one?
No, again, the PPP in particular is great because that entire loan could potentially be forgivable. So that's a great tool. And again, the state-specific programs here in Minnesota, there is some forgivability portion of it, but each program has its own little nuance. But many of the programs are offering forgivable assistance.
Jason, I believe this was when you were going through the application. We had a couple of questions here on what should nonprofits put in for the owner field.
Oh, great question. You know, that comes up often. So on the owner field, since nonprofits don't really have an owner, there's sometimes an agent in the nonprofit that has ability to you know, sign for financial documents. It could be, you know, it could be the executive director, it could be another administrator, it could be somebody from the board, but usually in a nonprofit, there's somebody that is designated for those financial decisions or financial authorization. So that person can put that name under that line item. Good question.
And a couple more questions here. One on the deed loans, so the DEED loans. Are those only for-profit companies, or are those for nonprofits as well? Just a clarifying question on the response. And then also, oh yeah, go ahead on that, Bruce.
They are available to nonprofits as well, yes.
Great. And then also to clarify on EIDL, so if I'm understanding this correctly, is it the 10K grant or the 10K advance that is essentially forgivable, and then the other chunk of that, what you're approved for on that application would be according to those terms kind of listed on the site? Or is that also forgivable?
Under the IDL loan, yes, the advance is a forgivable, it becomes a grant. But the remainder of the IDL loan is in fact a loan that must be repaid. The Paycheck Protection Program, again, is typically it starts out as a loan, but assuming that you use it for the allowable uses, it becomes forgivable as well, and so ultimately becomes a grant.
Thank you, Bruce. I cut out there for a minute.
And we do encourage folks to apply for both the IDL and the Paycheck Protection Loan. There's some confusion as to how the two of these things work. You have to understand it is extremely unusual that the federal government was able to, first of all, pass this law as quickly as they did, but more importantly, to write the guidelines, the federal regulations that are required to actually implement the law. Those are designed to be between the passage of the law and the actual money hitting the streets. It defines the mechanics of how the program works. Unheard of that those federal regulations were written and passed as quickly as they were. That's why there's so much confusion among the lending community as to what's what, how does this work. There's a lot of misinformation out there about how the programs work in general. I always refer folks directly back to the SBA website specifically, and to the deed website specifically, to get their questions answered, to make sure that we're getting the most correct answer. But we also do encourage folks to apply for both of those programs, as well as the state programs that are available. Ultimately, somehow we'll sort out what works well, which one comes first, which one comes later. I saw that there was a question that the state of Minnesota programs could be used in tandem with the EIDL and paycheck protection programs. That's correct, but the state programs are meant to be a bridge loan. And if you're successful in obtaining an EIDL loan, typically we're going to want you to repay that bridge loan as opposed to making it forgivable. So again, all of these things are very much in a state of flux. Things are changing daily, if not hourly. And so just stay in touch with the primary sources and with your lenders to help work through some of these guidelines as we go.
So there's a question here. I'll start off with just a few thoughts on, but then I'd like to open it up to you guys, Bruce and Jason, just to get your thoughts. So this is from an attendee who's saying a business would like to apply for a small amount of PPP, but for ethical reasons do not want to apply for the full amount that they're eligible for. How they go about requesting an amount less than what the calculation provides for. I mean, my recommendation, responding directly, would just be to take the full amount, and you can always repay immediately what you don't need or don't plan on using, but it would always be nice to have the liquidity up front in these turbulent trying times, just to have available. However, I'm not sure what the mechanism would be for actually applying for less, and I'm not sure if Bruce or Jason, you have any thoughts on that.
I'm sure you could work through with your loan officer. If you go, first of all, I'd recommend you apply for as much as you can apply for. Then later decide whether or not you're ultimately going to take the full amount that you were approved for. Frankly, I don't know if in fact you intend to use the loan as it was originally set up so that it's going to become fully forgivable. I don't know why you wouldn't take the full amount that you have available to you. But if you're concerned about that or have some question, yes, you can drop down the amount that you ultimately close and take, and you'll work through that with your SBA loan officer as you get to the point of ultimately closing the loan.
Yeah, and if you're not going to take the full amount, I'm wondering if there might be a different lending option or a different funding option for some of that. You know, if certainly you're going to use it for something like payroll, you know, that's forgivable. But I'm pretty sure there's a spot application for the amount requested. You could just work with your loan officer on that. Interesting question.
Another question on here was if anyone had actually received the advance yet on the SBA application. I haven't heard yet of anyone who had received the cash. I'm not sure what the holdup is or what's going on there. And I'm also not sure if anyone else has any insight to this. I know it's relatively chaotic right now. Bruce, Jason, any insight there?
Well, I've had a lot of conversations with clients about the application process, but with the volume that I've had, I haven't had a chance to circle back with everybody yet. I know the initial applications were overwhelming for the disaster loan piece, and I haven't heard updates of who got approved yet, but I also haven't heard back from many clients yet, so I haven't heard yet.
Yeah, chaotic is an understatement. We started getting some early statistics as in like 2 days into the EIDL program as to whether or the number or percentage of loans that had been approved versus those that had been declined. But SBA quickly retooled their application process, as Jason mentioned. And again, it's now much easier to apply for the loan. They're asking for less information. My sense is more people are getting approved. But frankly, I haven't heard of anyone who's closed any one of these loans yet at this point. We're anxiously awaiting the first people who are actually getting cash in their hands, and I'm not aware that anyone has yet at this point.
There's another question here on a list of lenders who are participating in PPP in Minnesota, and whether we might have one to share. Unfortunately, we on Generators, we do not yet. Not that we've been able to find or compile. As you can understand, things have been rolling out and changing daily, especially with whether or not people are accepting any more. I know there's been huge influxes of applications that some banks have been getting, and they've been closing them down as a result. So this has been rolling out and changing daily. And it's been hard to get a firm grasp on who's in and who's out at this point. We're working on putting that together just to see specifically if there are small community banks that are making themselves available that we could share with you all. So stay tuned on that. It's our strong recommendation in the interim that, number one, you reach out to your existing banker that you have a relationship with to begin compiling all the documents that you'll need to prove payroll. Work with them on what their recommendations are for the process. If it turns out they're no longer accepting those applications, still compile that information, but I would gather a list of every single community bank that operates locally and reach out to them one by one and until you get a fuller picture of who is accepting outside clients right now for these applications. Some may reject right away. Some might let you know that they're planning on opening this up today, tomorrow, sometime this week. It's our strong recommendation to start doing that legwork and don't wait.
Absolutely.
Here's another one. From an attendee, we have 1099 employees. Is it a smart move to advise them to apply for the PPP individually? They are excluded from the payroll count. Any things to consider there?
I believe since they're independent contractors, they can apply for PPP themselves. I think that's how that would work for them. Yes.
They can, and we're hearing that sometimes that's an advantage to the applicant, but sometimes it makes more sense for them to apply for unemployment, particularly with the new $600 advance or $600 payments that they're making under the unemployment program. Sometimes it works out better to apply for unemployment as opposed to applying for the Paycheck Protection Program. Each individual case is going to be different. And I encourage you to work through that with your financial people, your accountant or your banker or an SBDC consultant or anyone that you can to help try to walk through that process. Call your UI folks, call your unemployment folks, and they can help as well.
And the follow-up question there from that same attendee is, what if they're still employed / if they haven't been laid off and therefore might not qualify?
Well, typically they're not going to qualify if they haven't been laid off and they've still got income coming in.
Correct.
So a question here on if you can apply for PPP if you are a sole proprietor. I know that you can under the EIDL, sole proprietors. I'm not sure if you can for PPP. Jason and Bruce, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, when they first began the PPP loan program, the opening date for most businesses was last Monday or Friday, whatever day it is. I don't know. It's all a blur at this point. I guess the 3rd. So that must have been Friday. The sole proprietors are supposedly not allowed to apply until next Friday, the 10th. And again, that may change. I've heard some conflicting information already this morning, but as we originally understood it, sole proprietors could not apply until April 10th.
And yes, there is a portion where in PPP that is going to help the sole proprietors, but yeah, to Bruce's point, not till the 10th.
This is another great question here. Do these loans need a personal guarantee?
No, SBA waived personal guarantees on all these programs. Unheard of.
Very unusual.
Actually, I think under the IDL program, when it first started at any rate, I know we asked this question and they did say there was a personal guarantee. I know there is not one for the Paycheck Protection Program. IDL may still have that personal guarantee requirement, but they may have changed that as well with the new application.
Okay, any other questions here from the group. I'm not seeing any new ones come in yet, but we still have about 10 minutes here if you want to jump on.
We were too quick and efficient, Jason.
I try to be.
Yeah, there you go.
There's a lot going on.
Interesting time, right? We got bigger fish to fry.
Oh, so we had a follow-up on a question. Oh, getting to there's one on local programs from Minneapolis. I'll get to that in one moment. In terms of a follow-up for whether or not they would individually qualify, or sorry, if you can apply for PPP as a sole proprietor, or no, this is on personal guarantees. My apologies here. So their clarifying question is there may be or there might be a personal guarantee on PPP? If I understood you correctly, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think so. On PPP, there is no personal guarantee.
And the only question would be on EIDL, correct? Is that where you're? Yes. Right. So it could be that there is for the EIDL. I don't believe there is for the cash advance, like 10K, essentially.
No.
Yeah.
Nope.
Well, again, that's part of the IDL application. So
yeah,
technically, yes, there is a personal guarantee, but that money, that if in fact you qualify for that and get those funds, and remember, it's up to 10,000, not necessarily 10,000. When they first came out, they just said it was 10,000, but it's up to 10,000. That money is going to come in the form of a grant, so that's not repayable. So certainly no guarantee would be required on that portion. But remember, that's part of the bigger application for the IDL loan, and there may still be a personal guarantee requirement for the overall loan.
Thank you. So then last question here, local programs for cities like Minneapolis within the state and municipal programs that might be rolling out. This is a great question. So on our end, we're right now compiling a resources list that is hopefully going to be as comprehensive as we can get it regarding state, federal, and municipal programs, also including some philanthropic options that might be available in those various markets throughout the state. So we'll be sharing that with attendees as we can gather it. So stay tuned there. With that context, Bruce, is there anything that comes to mind for you that might be available? I think specifically in this question's context for Minneapolis, or things that they should check with their municipal governments or economic development agencies on?
I don't have any information about the Minneapolis program, but I know there's a lot of communities that are trying to do this. Many communities have been working with the Department of Employment and Economic Development on other economic development programs where the state has granted them funds over the time period. Those funds were then turned around and made in the form of loans to local businesses. And when those loan payments came back in, the city was not required to return the money to deed. In fact, they kept the money in a revolving loan fund account that the city could then use for other economic development activities. Because of this disaster, we're trying to loosen up the requirements for many of those revolving fund accounts so that cities can, in fact, make use of those funds and put those monies out for small businesses. But every single one that you do is going to have different requirements. And so there's no uniform answer for whether or not a city, first of all, even has them. And secondly, if they do, under what terms can you access them, and what are the repayment and forgivability requirements associated with that. So you're just going to have to check with each individual community.
Thank you. And we have another question that came in about, this is, let's read it. So Wells Fargo has already announced that they have hit the small business loan limit. Is it too late? So we addressed this a few minutes earlier, but just to go in directly again on this, because I feel like it should be emphasized. So there are several large lending institutions that have announced that they've kind of hit their capacity on these applications. It is our strong recommendation that you begin reaching out to local financial institutions and community banks to see if they are accepting outside clients. If your banker that you have developed a relationship with is no longer accepting these applications, we anticipate that more of these banks will begin accepting outside applications over the next few days. But obviously, this is these are turbulent times, and there's no guarantees. There are some recommendations we've been getting from entrepreneurs within our network suggesting Lendio and also Choice Bank. I'm not sure how they're doing this on the back end. However, we have heard that specifically around Lendio, they have been accepting applications and then somehow brokering them out to a variety of banks across the country until they can try to get a hit on somebody who will process it.
I can't speak for Minnesota. I thought I saw a list of SBA 7A lenders for the state of Wisconsin, but it's tricky. Yeah, I tried to give a few ideas. And I think there's some credit unions that are also able to process some of the SBA loans. So you might see if there's a credit union in your area. Some of the community banks are also 7A lenders. If there's a community bank in your area that you could give a shot, that might work too. But I think this might be, it's tricky, but it might be one of those things where you just have to reach out and see who is accepting and who's got capacity.
One caveat that I'll add there is beware of scams. We're already hearing horror stories about folks that are trying to take advantage of small businesses and individuals in particular. So just make sure you're dealing with a reputable lender and that you know that this thing is actual legit and not a scam.
Yes, thank you. Couldn't agree more there. So if there are no more questions here, I'd like to wrap things up just by, first of all, thanking everyone for their time and coming on today. We hope that this was helpful. I'll be following up to all attendees with a link to sign up for office hours as well. Folks from Generator staff will be making themselves available throughout the rest of the afternoon and at various times throughout the week for one-on-one calls where you can walk us through your situation, and then we can do our best to help you navigate this process and guide you to the correct local resources to provide additional information and help. Additionally, as you know, this is the first of 5 days of these free webinars where we'll have guest speakers talking about a variety of topics. So I'm going to quickly run through the schedule for the rest of the week. Tuesday, tomorrow, we will have a representative from Minnesota Online Counseling walking through business owners on mental health and wellness resources available to them and their employees through this time. Wednesday, we'll have a representative from Advisen Legal walking through the employment law ramifications as they relate to the passage of the CARE Act and things that you need to consider. On Thursday, we'll have a few state representatives from the DEED to talk about state and local resources, both for COVID and also just support resources in general that they offer continuously. And then Friday, we will have an outside speaker presenting on how to use this time to best sharpen your business while you do have some downtime and take advantage of it as best you can while you're also trying to take advantage of these assistance programs. And it looks like someone did just share banks in Minnesota, a list of those lender list for these programs. So I'm going to share that with the group as well and follow up with another list of resources that you should look at in your communities. So any last thoughts, Bruce and Jason, before we sign off?
There's a lot going on. There's a lot of information, but just take it as you can go and be prepared to adapt. There's a lot of change and a lot of adapting.
Yes, and I'd like to thank you, Ben and Generator, for putting on this webinar today. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about the SBDC. And again, we encourage anyone to contact the SBDC. It isn't going to cost you anything. And we can maybe answer some additional questions and help you wade through these applications. So feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you to you both. And for everyone who's still on, we will be sharing, this has been recorded, this session, so we will be sharing this with the group. It will actually be listed on a resources page for this program that I will also share. So if you need to review it, it will be available in the next 24 to 48 hours. Thank you again, Bruce and Jason. Thank you to everyone who came on. Let us know how we can be more helpful, and we'll see you all either in office hours or at the next webinar tomorrow.
You're welcome. Great. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Have a good one.